Welcome to LBBs Open House, our podcast on how to build brands better. And I'm your host, Suchita Salwan, the co-founder of LBB. On Open House, I have candid conversations with founders, CXOs, investors and entrepreneurs behind India's most compelling brands and businesses. Today, I'm in conversation with two co-founders from St.Art India, which is an organization dedicated to democratizing art through street art, especially for the public. What started out as a project of sorts in Shahpur Jat, which is a small colony based out of Delhi, St.Art India today has scaled their street art projects across India from Chennai and Goa to Mumbai, Hyderabad and beyond. It's a mammoth project that involves multiple stakeholders from local governments and municipalities, community sponsors, artists, and that they've been able to transform these quaint little neighborhoods and cities into absolutely beautiful art districts is absolutely commendable. I don't think people realize what a mammoth job putting together an art district really is, from local governments to local municipalities, communities, artists, sponsors and more. They've had to tackle and deal with a lot of different multiple stakeholders in order to create these absolutely glorious art districts, and especially if you're in any of the cities that they have art districts in, I urge you, go check them out. Not only do they make for great Instagram content, but it's also great to see cities come alive with the work that they do. So why exactly am I interviewing a not-for-profit on LBB's Open House? Two reasons. Despite being a not-for-profit, St.Art India truly is an absolutely spectacular consumer user brand, right? They have done an absolutely phenomenal job in making appreciation of street art and just consumption of street art mainstream. And while a lot of cultural movements usually become niches, I think St.Art India, is one of those that's been able to break out of their niche and create something that's truly impactful. I come from a world that's obsessed with all things numbers, data, analytics, and this conversation with St.Art India was such a refresher because we take a breather from talking about product market fit and scaling to actually talking about how do you think and operate in a way where you give consumers more delight than boring consumers, with the same scale and with the same monotonous mundane routine. So there's lots of that on this conversation as well. It's a very welcome departure from my usual conversations, and I really hope you enjoy, opening your mind's eye and exploring about a niche and a cultural movement that I personally find truly spectacular. So here's our conversation with two co-founders of St.Art India, Hanif and Arjun. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you for joining us from a cave, Hanif, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. From a cave, yeah. Yeah.
That's
2,000 year
incredible.
old caves, yeah.
That's incredible. Are you going to paint over here as well? No, you're going to...
No, I've just kind of came here to appreciate it because there isn't much history about it. So I was like, let's go check this out. I've come here after 15 years. I used to spend a lot of my childhood here, so thought it would be good network here.
Yeah.
As well. Cool.
So Arjun, Hanif, welcome to our episode of Open House Season 2. It's absolutely awesome to have you guys on our show. I still very well remember when you guys started out, and I remember going to Shahpur Jat and attending your first walk and seeing all the fantastic work that you guys had done back then. And it's amazing to see how much you've grown. I want to start with with at least to me as an outsider, what St.Art India has been able to galvanize, which really is galvanize this obsession with millennials and young consumers to want to record experiences, right? And do things that they can put up on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, etc. I am 100% sure that's not the intent with which St.Art India, perhaps started. But first question to you guys, how have you been able to, construct the amount of virality that you've gotten, accidental as it may be?
So I think it's what we have been creating. There is a kind of visual value in it, and over the years, it's kind of become everyone's kind of looking for that unique background, and somewhere it's kind of got into that whole new background for this Instagram generation, but before that, the whole intent is to kind of create art in such a way that which is not been seen before, and also at a like which accessible also, which is kind of like one of the like biggest USPs that way.
Yeah, I think just to take on what Hanif has said, the intention was never there. We didn't even know we were going to be a non-profit when we met probably in Shaporjat for the first time, and it was just an intention to do something in the public spaces and to do something at that time mostly with graffiti as a medium and street art as well. But it's kind of we've evolved with it. We've learned on the way, and the form and is has evolved. Our projects have evolved. Our projects are not about taking pictures only. I mean, that's obviously one of the byproducts, but they are most of the projects I would say have a deeper meaning, have a lot of community involvement and interaction, and I think more than that as well. Now we see it as a kind of a movement, India-based movement in the visual art space, and becoming more and more working in tandem with various municipalities across India, various schemes like the Smart City scheme or the Hriday scheme, and seeing how we can contribute in the urban landscape when it comes to visual arts and public art, urban art, and see what the futures of our cities can look like in the next 10 to 15 years, because our cities are rapidly changing. Even our smaller cities, how they call the B2, B2, B3 towns, or are growing really fast. There's a huge urban infrastructure push, and it's an exciting time to be in India when it comes to all these things. Yeah.
I think there's also a really interesting way in which you guys have found a way to get very embedded into culture, right? In the sense, street art was never a part of your day-to-day culture, right? But I think everything from the locations that you've picked to even the artwork, and even when I drive around Lodi Colony, it's so interesting to see all the different characters up on the wall, and the nuances with which each and every one of these artworks are created. It's not easy to create a brand or a identity movement, whatever you want to call it, that gets embedded into culture. So what do you think is so intrinsic about the experience of street art for for an outsider, for someone who may not even know anything about art, folks like myself included, which has really enabled you guys to almost become, I don't know, mainstream to an extent? That's not the right word, but you get the point, right?
I think just to answer it, that we are accessible. We are not a niche project or a festival or an initiator. We are for the public, and I think when it's so accessible and so democratic, and we are really on your face, right? We don't need to go to a museum or a white cube gallery to see us. We on the streets. We almost somewhere or the other. The narrative is that we come to you. It might be fictional. We can't go everywhere, but essentially, and we are also permanent in nature. At least all the public artworks we are permanent. Our experiences are obviously short-lived, a month, 2 months, which is still quite a large duration to have a show open. So I think that itself has probably, how you said, embedded it as a part of culture. But we also have to realize that street art as a movement is a global movement, and it's a movement which is embraced by the internet quite well. It's a movement because of social media has given it that fuel to become larger than life, to compete with the contemporary art world. Some of the street artists are more well known than contemporary artists with a certain age group or a certain kind of lifestyle of people, right? So I think that is very, very that itself has also fueled the whole embedment of what our work is. I feel, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a new movement which we call it urban contemporary. Which has more access points, both on ground and online, and that's what's kind of like it's kind of like a new urban art movement which is kind of like arrived at your doorstep is what maybe you know what we would like to call it.
And I think what's also interesting about you guys is it's not like you have a customer persona, right? Like, most guests who we have on the show, they are building products that are meant for, you know what I mean? Like a female who is in between 30 to 35 years of age and earning XYZ rupees. You guys don't have, I mean, because your consumers, everyone from, a rickshaw driver to someone driving past in their BMWs, on that street. But you've still found a way to be delightful to all of those kinds of customers, right? What do you think is the lowest common denominator here? Is it that element of surprise, right? Is it that element of like, I didn't think this would be here? Is it the characters that these artists make? So what do you think is that underlying principle that's actually enabled you guys to unify people from such different walks of life and enjoy the same thing?
I mean, first of all, we don't look at them as customers, because we are not selling anything. We don't have, there is no product as such. I mean, even though you can kind of like categorize it as a product, but we are not selling anything, and we are not in the business of any of that which kind of like deals with consumers as such. Even though like when people are coming and doing stuff, they kind of like become consumers. They consume art and do what it is, but it's there's definitely when it comes to street art, it's very difficult to also curate it in a very tight manner, because our visual language, our visual understanding and education is different, like from person to person. But at the same time, everyone kind of like, because it's out there, it also has an influence over a person, and then it also gives that person an opportunity to say that I can also do it. I can also become an artist. I can also paint, and that is also fueled by internet with the techniques and everything is there. So when all of these kind of like comes into a place, it kind of like starts to multiply, and as it multiplies, you see kind of like more and more of it, and there's that familiar angle starts coming in, and when that familiarity comes in, you kind of like, you have a stronger connection with the audiences.
What is that human desire that you think you guys have been able to tap into? What is that? Is it entertainment? Is it having, like you said, aspiration could be one thing, right? Where, hey man, like if this can exist, I can be a part of something like this too. Is there any other very like interesting thing that you've learned while either talking to your users or consumers or even artists when it comes to what is this human desire that makes people really love what you do, apart from, hey, this looks cool on my Instagram and I got 100 likes thanks to what Start India did?
Yeah, I think it's about the community, and it's about everyone having a fair ground or to think and to interpret the work in their own ways, because there's no right or wrong way. I think that's what at least I've understood as well. When it comes to a local perspective, the community itself, people who have not spoken for years or don't have the time end up speaking with each other because they are either a part of the process, or they're walking around themselves, or they're seeing the mural, etc. People come together for this, conversations start. So from a community perspective, I think that togetherness somewhere or the other comes with the art, either by default or sometimes it just happens because it's meant to happen. And again, like when you're not trying hard to sell anyone anything, right? I think the reactions are different. We're not asking you to come and like our work, or we're not asking you to do it. And in fact, we are saying that this is there. You can appreciate it and you can interpret it in 1,000 ways. Plus, also, people see there's an effort from us. There's no branding. There's no Coca-Cola. There's no names like that. The intent is very, very, very true and is for the arts. And the intent is for the city, all the art districts is for the city. People read about it and they understand, oh, wow, this is the Lodi Art District. And when you drive past it and then you see the effort, it's not a small effort. It's an effort which has taken 4 to 5 years to have 55 murals over there. And similarly with other cities. So that intent itself kind of says, there are some guys on the block who are wanting to do this for the city. They're not selling us anything, firstly. They actually, I can come and see it. I can get my kids, they can come and see it. I can get my grandfather who can come and see it, my parents who can come and see it. And actually, you know what, we can have a great outing seeing this art. And if I really want to get in depth to understand what the artist really meant, then I can read up about it individually. So I think that itself kind of helps the whole situation, I suppose. I don't know if it makes sense.
No, it totally does. And you're right, where I think, in today's day and age where everyone expects, some transaction to happen, right? You guys are one of the fewer movements where literally everything is, non-transactional. And I wanted to, maybe use that as a way to segue into my next question, which was to what you said, right? None of your murals have any call to action. So it's not like you're saying buy now 50% off or, follow us at Start India to know more. You guys are very happy sort of, playing in the background, but you've still managed to build your brand very well. And I'm pretty sure a lot of your brand partners who work with you, whether it's, Singapore Tourism or Asian Paints, a lot of them have also seen traction through everything that they've been a part of through you guys. So I guess my question over there is, how does that happen? How do you build a brand without, putting your logo everywhere? And how do you build a brand without, forcing a customer to come to your website or download your app after looking, at that visual creation? And how have you guys been able to do that for yourselves as well as your brand partners?
So when we started the journey, we kind of first festival when we were in Shahpur, there was no Asian Paint back then. Like I remember me and Arjun were kind of discussing, saying that should we call this paint and should we call that paint, and whether, because there was no example, there was nothing to kind of show it to, that this is what we are doing and this is what's possible. Even the word graffiti or street art was kind of a little bit not that easy as what it is today. So then when we were approaching, or when the brands were approaching us, and there wasn't any kind of fit. While when everybody came and told us that, oh, you should work with Asian Paint, because that's a paint company, and there is a very direct kind of a fit, that when we went and told Asian Paint that this is what we would like to do, they kind of they understood the vision, and since then we kind of as a vision partner, we work together. We don't work together on a tactical things as a when, but more as a longer vision of something which we all both believe in, and we're gonna work like a partner, from that point of view, rather than they are sponsoring it or anyone else we kind of approach. Although that's going to be either a government partner or a non-profit partner, but not a brand as such. We do work with brands at times, but in such a way that we are not anyway advertising for them also. Well, if we can do some work together to do something good, why not? Let's do that, but not as an exercise, as a branding exercise, that if we do this and we're going to have more visibility, from that point of view.
This is obviously Hanif is the great brand maverick. He builds brand for a living, and that's the question we asked Hanif when we were starting Start. How do we build a brand, right? And I think what he said is absolutely right, and what everyone's vision has steered this is quite right. And today we are we are very thankful and to our partner, most particularly Asian Paints, who've really understood the long-term vision. There's no short-term vision over here. We are in it together, and them being a credible company, very, very, it's a no-brainer when it comes to this. Again, working with brands or other foundations and government, very important, right, for different projects. And if the project needs participation, yes, we would work. But if it's force fit, then we would rather not work. We wouldn't want to fit the brand into the project. That's never the intention, irrespective of the monies they offer or things like that. And I suppose that also helps in the brand building process. That kind of helps that these guys are saying no. There's so many are saying no to money or funds or partnerships because it's not logical at that time. It's a force fit. I remember back in the day when we started off, Dio was a big thing. Axe Dios and all these other Dios were coming out, and they all wanted us to work with Dio. And I was like, we were wondering, what does street art have anything to do with Dio? I mean, what can we do? And they said, under the art, when the artist is working, we can do some testing on the streets. And I was like, you're like, what a stupid idea. We're not doing it. It's so embarrassing to do all this. Never, right? So, and these weird kind of collaborations come up, and finally, it's not, we're not making money out of this, right? And if it was about money, maybe we would have said, okay, let's sell Dio under street art. But the intention is not to make money. We're still struggling. When we see our paychecks, we struggle. Hanif would say, I was getting paid this 20 years ago. But that's what it probably takes to make a great brand. I mean, that's what probably it takes to have certain sacrifices, project over money, ethos over money, and what we really stand for. And it's not only Hanif and me, all the 5 co-founders and our team stand for this, and we are very clear on this matter. We didn't start this to advertise this project. We didn't start this for someone's brand promotion. We started for a very serious thing India needs, was to really create a movement of visual culture in India, to work and contribute in our cities, work with smart cities, show the world what the new India is. We keep on talking about a country being half a country being under the age of 34 or whatever it might be. But what is the export when we see, right? We hardly see that export, right? We want this to be a major part of the export from India. And we're hoping that the government embraces it. And we're hoping there are more cultural shows where, visual aesthetics of India and other subcultures are taken internationally and appreciated, and kind of becomes a trend or whatever you might call it, or an important part of India,
So I want to, and what you mentioned is so interesting, right? Where there's so much to celebrate about what India has to offer, but for some strange reason, things just get sort of like sucked into niches, right? Or they aren't able to strike a chord with customers at large. And accessibility is a big problem over there, and whether it's textile, art, music, whatever, just creating more access ends up becoming a big unlocker. There's a bit of a contradiction in that, no? I think what's interesting about subculture is it is a subculture because there is some amount of exclusivity associated with it, right? It is a subculture because there is a niche to it. There is an audience that it at max can extend or expand to. And in my opinion, that actually leads to demise of a lot of great subcultures because they're not necessarily able to pull out of those niches, right? You guys have taken your niche, which was Shapurjat, and you're now in every single corner of India, from Goa, if I'm not mistaken, Hyderabad, Kochi. Please shoot more cities my way. But you guys have taken a subculture, but you've managed to scale it. How do you think you've been able to do that, apart from obviously finding the right partner and finding walls? That's one part of it. But my question to you is, if there are people listening in who may have products, or maybe a part of a subculture that's niche, but they really want to see it grow from strength to strength. What are the unlockers that you've seen in your journey that have helped you get to where you are at right now, where you're not just a Shapurjat movement, but you're a pan-India movement, and the whole world knows about you?
It's like when we were in Shapurjat, we actually literally used to go and ask people that, can we paint? Can we paint here? Is this like possible? Then they'll ask you, is somebody paying you money for it? We're like, no. Then why are you doing it? Who's getting you paint? All these kind of like questions, and kind of like literally trying to explain everyone that like what is street art and why we are doing it and everything. And from there on, since we kind of like started to work with more governments, and we decided that instead of working with private people, we would like mostly work with government. And since then, it's become like it's not a push, but kind of a more of a pull kind of strategy that way, where once we are doing something, then the other states also want us to do that.
So basically get the right stakeholders involved. In this case, it's the government. So basically you guys have created FOMO in between states, which is great, because if that's what it takes to scale, then so be it.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly that, and obviously you can get involved with all these state governments, and now we have a special division in our organization which deals with expansion and going to strategic states. For us, Northeast is a very important area to be in. For us, Kerala at this point and South is also very important. Also, somewhere or the other, we've seen certain states and certain spaces react better to our work, right? And it's also important that if people and the key stakeholders, the municipalities are interested, right? And it just helps us to be there for sure. If you're not interested at all, then we may not even be in that state or that city. So I think it works both ways. We obviously have our certain aspirations that we want to be in. These are the urban cities we want to be in. We want to contribute. And sometimes what happens is opportunities come from the other side. So it's a mix of both. And I think more than anything else is the effort of the team. And it's the efforts of our partners. It's such a team effort. We have people constantly traveling to different states. We have been on this game for the last 6 years, on our toes, planning states in advance. Unfortunately, pre-COVID, we knew what we were going to do for the next 2 or 3 years. Now it's a little dicey, though we are still working because public spaces are still accessible and we can still work. So we are fortunate for that. So, so maybe a little bit of good luck as well, I suppose. Right?
Speaking of good luck, right? You guys have so many different stakeholders that you're always trying to, partner with or please to some extent, right? Your governments, your local communities, municipalities are one, your artists are another. Obviously, people coming to consume this work of art are the third, right? And then you've got your fourth, which is in the form of brands that you end up partnering with, be it Asian Paints or any of these other guys. Now, obviously, each of these different stakeholders have very different incentives, right? Like as a user, all I want is cool things to see, experience, open my mind's eye a little bit. But as a government or as a municipality, I may want a very different outcome to, say Asian Paints and what they're doing by being a partner of this whole experience. How have you guys as co-founders of this, right, struck a balance in between dealing with so many sort of vendors, right, and partners with very different, skins in the game, like everyone has their own agenda over here, and manage to, I would assume, obviously make everyone happy at some level, which is why, only more and more doors are opening up to you. So how have you guys managed to find common ground amongst all of these very different stakeholders and still continue to, make your magic happen?
I think it's passion led. That's the only thing I can say. But I think the takeaway is that the wants from us is not very different from everyone, right? The want is, and because we don't take money from government, right? So the want is different. And in fact, we are coming most of the times. We are coming contributing to their states or to their localities with very little support from them. The support is. Not when you see what our effort is or our partner Asian Paints effort is when it comes to the government, their support is very small. Their support is limited to a permission or to helping us, go around the bureaucracy or helping us with, the structures and the infrastructure to do it, and all of that. While we come in with the art and we come in with the production and we come in with the financials and we come in with the PR plans and social media and all of that. So I think they just want us to come and do the work, because they're really not 95% of the times, I would say, they're not funding us per se. They're giving us, I would say it's a barter and a partnership barter where they're probably just helping us with some infrastructure or some guest houses they may have so we can offset some of our costs. So I think they just want a great work. They just want Start to be there. So they can talk about it and they can say, hey, in our city, we have Start as a project like you have over there. And they want us to come and work again and again and see if there's a common ground to create an art district or come year on year. So their want is totally different, right? And they're not demanding per se like that. Yes, obviously there's a hierarchy and there's a respect and there's a lot of learning for us to do from them because you're dealing with some serious IAS officers who are brilliant, and it's pleasure working with them and their teams and the municipality. And I think that is the scariest stakeholder when you think about which scares you the most, right? The government, somewhere or the other, is like, oh, it's going to be very difficult. That scares you the most. And in fact, they're the nicest and the easiest lot to work with. Once they've understood what your intention is, once they've understood that this is for the city, this is not for a personal agenda, this is not just for an inauguration of some minister coming in, right? Yes, inauguration is a byproduct. Great, that will happen. But we have to see the impact from a longer point of view. So I think they are the nicer, easier people to deal with. Communities are more difficult to work with. Communities, now there's a body of work, so we can explain to them what we want to do and what the intention is, what the process is going to be. But many times we looked upon with suspicion. We looked upon as agents of government for gentrification. And it happens, right? And their suspicion is totally valid. We could potentially be an agent for the government for gentrification, right? But our intention is not that. So that community interaction, I think, and the community buy-in is very important, because finally we're going into someone's place or house or locality. We have lived for ages, generations have lived there. And we are coming to say that we're going to put art out there. We're going to involve you guys to put the art out there. We're going to put a different perspective out there. And because of the act of what we're going to do, there will be a lot of limelight or spotlight in your area. There will be people, indigenous people coming for walks, tours. There will also be tourists coming over here, maybe. So in fact, we're going into that place, and that buy-in is important. And therefore, we start this process a couple of months before any initiative which happens when it comes to a larger art district or creating an art district or a festival. And that process is very important to understand what they want to do. That's if we get that buy-in from them, and if we get their community leaders, the kids, the housewives, or whoever we need to be a part of this process, they need to believe in us. So, and how do they believe in us is if we listen to them, if their suggestions are taken forward and truly, and if we also say that your suggestions are taken, but the interpretation would be this, and what do you think about it? You're going to work with an artist. Maybe you're not the one who's going to be painting. Maybe you might just be helping. Maybe your kid will be helping. Maybe they'll learn something. Maybe there are a series of art projects and workshops and dialogues and showcases for the community to be a part of. So yeah, that's where I feel is the most critical one. And coming to our partners, as you know, we've not, other than the government, we don't work with many brands. We work with foundations, we work with Asian Paints, so it's quite set and it's quite clear. We write agendas together many a times. We think about cities together many times. So it's very clear from the beginning what we want to do. They have certain aspirations. We have certain aspirations. We have many common grounds. We work with foundations like the JSW Foundation is a great partner for us. Then we go to cities. We have city-wise foundations which we work with, and other non-profit organizations. So that's kind of very, very clear about.
And the embassies also.
Obviously the embassies, yes. Embassies is a super important one.
We work with many embassies.
Are they the ones who help you with the artists? Like that's the unlocker there?
Yes, they mostly help us with the artists and fund part of their trip. And some, so their funding is there. And also, we end up using the assets, be it the cultural centers if they have any, and things like that. So that way there is a balance, I suppose, and there's negotiation and all of that. But I think there's a set system now, of what we want to do, and how we want to achieve it. And it's always a struggle to go to a new city, but once you've been there, because we really become a part of the city or the teams, and then year on year it becomes easier because we intend to go year on year, and then we have local teams over there, we have setups over there, we have a volunteer base, we have people who are employed for that duration time, we have partners, and then it works out much better.
I also love how you guys think about your festivals, right? Because unlike traditional brands who will, produce one ad reel and then put that ad reel on 60 channels and radio stations and, boost it on Facebook and Instagram or whatever, you guys actually find a way to create multiple assets within one project, right? So, and even if you look at Lodi district as an example, what you guys did in Kona, right? And just the experiences that you built over there, or the walks that you've done, which has kind of been a constant since your Shapojar days, where, you get artists to interact with users and tell the story behind the artwork. Could you talk a little bit about, how you guys have taken this one asset, which in this case could be an art district, but just really created multiple different elements, and maybe even for our listeners who aren't familiar with Start, maybe talk a little bit about, all the varied elements that come together to, make this the festival explosion that you guys are able to do.
With our festivals, we have been kind of like very spontaneous, and we never kind of like had a format in which that you're going to follow this format. There's going to be this, there's going to be that. Not in terms of the venue, the city, the timing. Everything is kind of like nothing's fixed. It kind of like actually works as per our convenience that way. And whenever we see that kind of like fitting it right, rather than we following that, that these are the certain dates and this is the timing and this is where you can come. It's kind of like more of that surprise is also kind of like working in our favor that way, where there is going to be something new, and we also kind of like, for us also, it's that new venue, that new vibe, the whole new energy of the space. And working with that, like, you should see Julia when kind of like, she's kind of like there on the ground. It's almost like that we're kind of living there for that period of time, whether it's a Sundog or it's Kona or like, many other festivals which we had in the past. And that newness also comes from this whole, that if you would have followed a format, if you would have kind of like followed something, then we had to do certain things, and then we kind of like building up our audiences in that, in a very like systematic manner. But here it's kind of like surprise versus systems, and we go with the surprise.
I like that articulation.
I don't have much to add to it. I think Hanif in a snapshot has said everything over there. Yeah, but these collaterals are very important because usually we don't have spaces where people come and interact, and there's no melting pot. Where in our district we don't have. Yeah, now we started having programming. We take over the streets, and we do workshops, and now we've started this whole new mobility project with at Lodi Art District. We're trying to create. The whole city is cycling, so we want to create. We've done one experiment back about 2 months ago, and we're going to go on with that experiment where, how can we interact with different stakeholders and things like that. But we need these collaterals kind of bring people together to make it into that festival, because many cities don't have that experience space like a Kona or the inland container depots where we did all the containers, or the Sasson dock and so on and so forth. So these collaterals kind of bring people together and the community together, for the showcase and for what's happening, etc. So it's obviously very vital. What I said, and you can see Julia passionately being in mostly all these cities, hustling with all the guys, be it the guys from Chennai or be it the guys from Bombay or Delhi, and being a part of it and really getting our hands dirty to get that done. Yeah.
So just last couple of questions for you guys, right? I'm going to start with the most meta one, which is, why does culture matter? And the reason I'm asking you that is, in at least my world, everything is about standardization. You know what I mean? Like everything is about like, how do you make this scalable? How do you standardize? How do you, pull from here, there, everywhere? Your world seems like the opposite, right? Where the more non-standard it is, the better the outcome. Because if you literally had the same art on every wall in every city, it won't be special anymore, right? Your comment, Hanif, about systems versus surprises. Why does culture matter? And what about, cities finding their own identity or their own culture? Why do you think that's important, especially in a country, like India?
We are not, we are part of the culture. And so, there is no way to kind of like separate us and culture. We kind of like, there is this, obviously there are different circles of cultures. And The one which we are trying to kind of like draw, which is a circle of like popular art culture, which didn't exist before. I mean, it was there maybe back in the day when Raja Ravi Verma used to kind of like, do these god paintings, and then people used to buy it, and that kind of like became a popular art at one point. In today's time, that Indian popular culture, the people who's been kind of, especially I'm talking about as a visual industry, where there was no recognition of visual industry before, and we kind of like getting into that visual progressing towards an industry which is still going to be non-systematic, and it's still going to be like in that way, but it will have more people, it will employ more people. It also kind of like, but as a career choice which people have never seen it at before, like, even for us, like that now we are doing it. But I see that like now many kids who come to us and say that like, what do you do? You say, oh, I'm a street artist, and I'm like I'm a graffiti artist, and they have a card, and I'm like, wow, like, back in the day we never like thought we'll have a card which says I'm a graffiti artist. But what it is doing, it's kind of like creating a small little visual culture and that visual scene, and that, as more and more people are, and we all part of it, and because of that, I mean, it definitely kind of like, it definitely matters, is because it's part of our lives.
Yeah, I mean, also, the visual culture is something which is so tangible, right? You see it, it's like right there. If you paint something, you'll see it. So you can't ignore it. It's not like, and it's permanent. So yeah, I suppose it's going to get more and more relevant, right? And if you see today, all our global cities, cities who are in the top of the line, and when it comes to cultural cities or creative cities, they have public art as a very, very important part of it. I think public art holds most of the other subcultures or brands, or be it even music and all. People go, I mean, we travel because we want to go see what's happening in the arts, or if there is any art districts, or if there are murals or whatever festivals happening, because, and I think with the COVID times, it's going to even matter even more, because this is probably the streets, believe it or not, are still apparently safer than museums or galleries or all of that, because it's in the open. So people will be out more. People are already out more. As you see, people are at least out more on their bikes, or walking, or taking care of their health. And I think this is something which, this consumption will be very important, right? It's something which you can't ignore anymore. And when you can't ignore it, and you keep on seeing it, then you start thinking about it, then you start liking it, and then you like, oh, you get interested in it, then you start looking for it in different cities you go to, and maybe in different countries you go to. So
yeah. And that's what, I mean, Coca-Cola did. I mean, you see Coca-Cola
100%.
everywhere, and you're like, oh, you just kind of like start to having this familiarity with Coca-Cola. I mean, just a carbonated drink, but you see it like everywhere in the world, and then you're like, yeah, and then you start trusting Coca-Cola, because you've been just seeing and you've been drinking, and everyone's drinking it, so it's like, it's cool, it's fine, and then Coca-Cola becomes like a part of our culture, which is, I mean, kind of like one extreme of it. But on the other hand, I mean, and most of the Indian cities we always have our own visual culture. Like, from coming, if you are like, the streets of Chennai is going to be different from streets of Delhi, and then streets of Delhi are going to be different from the other cities, is because each of the cities also have their own visual cultures and their visual languages, and their certain like color schemes and vernacular, like, hand painted types, and even the ads. Like, I'm in this small city and I see so many painted ads that it's just normal to me, for everyone here to kind of like see these painted walls with big bold graphics, and it's whether we see it or not, but like, yeah, we are part of that visual culture.
I love that you define Coca-Cola as just another carbonated drink. It's
Well, it is,
awesome.
right? Yeah, I mean, it is.
Okay, last two questions for you guys. What are the Indian brands or subcultures that are in your little black book, which you think our listeners, must jump on and check out?
I mean, I'm not going to say the obvious, right? Art or graffiti, the obvious stuff, right? But b-boying and the hip hop and those are very important cultures. The Paco as a culture is coming up quite nicely, and my kids are getting interested in it. Other than that, obviously, music as a mainstream is there, but obviously there are lots more cool young bands out there. Um, just put me in the spot which I can't answer.
Any Indian brands as well? Like, are there any brands, whose work you're seeing, which is super interesting? So, like Bira, for example, did a great job with tapping into hip hop as a subculture, right? Which they obviously did in the most mainstream way. But any brands that you're seeing, doing really interesting work that you'd like to sort of, put the spotlight on?
Actually, there isn't any brand which kind of like comes on top of my head when you ask me this question, which is the brand which is kind of like using Indian visual culture that really well and doing something great about it. I don't kind of like, there aren't any brand which kind of comes to my mind. I mean, there are like artist collectives and there are artists who's been kind of like working, which are not necessarily brands. I mean, they're kind of like artists.
Yeah, talk about them.
I mean, like, let's say, when we started to kind of like work, and the people who were like there, people who were there, like say Amitabh Kumar for that matter, kind of working with graphic novel, Amitabh, but there's this whole Bangalore world with Apu Pen, and like, everyone's kind of like working with that graphic novel scene and coming up. In the Bombay scene, Sameer has been kind of like leading it and kind of like, doing lots of stuff, and kind of like also kind of having his own shows and doing stuff. There's Shiloh, who's kind of like doing with Fearless Collective and doing, her works in that way. There's Inkbrush and me, Harshvardhan Kadam, who's been kind of like working. There are, I mean, there are like these individual artists who've been kind of like working and doing projects and doing stuff, but I don't see there's any brand as such who's been kind of like, really out there on a visual thing. So for example, there's this culture shop which is there, and that's kind of like working with, visual arts collective.
There's Bombay Underground who does beautiful zine.
Yeah.
Those guys are cool as well.
Thank you so much, guys.
I
think sorry.
I want to say like people. I think I just want to say like, the people who's been kind of like listening to this and wanting to probably like, just give a little message saying that use street art for advertising. I just want to tell them that like, let's not look at the street art as like that way of like, advertising, because that's the only thing which is kind of like left out there, because the rest everything else is advertising all around us and it's everywhere. And if they ever want to kind of like work with street art, please think from something which is like, it's not like, that's something which want to market, but something which you want to be part of the culture. And if you kind of like come with that genuine, idea of like being part of the culture, or there's something which you want your brands to be part of the culture, it's going to be a long journey. It's going to be a difficult journey, but eventually it'll happen if the intention is going to be right. And, and we can always kind of like work with brands who support or kind of respect this, this idea of like being, not selling someone something directly that way, but kind of like being part of the culture on a longer run. And yeah, I think there is still a big scope for Indian brands to kind of like, celebrate and be part of this whole, new exciting world of urban contemporary art.
100%. I couldn't agree more. And I think, that's why I really wanted you guys to come on Open House, because most of our other conversations are very like business, right? So how do you find product market fit? What's your target addressable market? And all of that's great. But I think it's to what you said, right? If you really want to build a brand, you need to find a way to become a part of people's everyday. And I think that's what you guys have been able to do. Obviously, you guys have taken a really interesting and a little like Hutke route to, making that happen, which is true to, to you guys and what you're passionate about. But I mean, you couldn't have said it better, right? Where you're totally right. There's a huge opportunity for more and more brands to actually want to give back versus just, extract. And right now, a lot of the way brands are being built is, I want to take out as much as I can. Thank you so much. This was awesome. And I hope, I hope this was a good refresher to all of our listeners, because what you guys are doing is commendable, and the authenticity with which you've done it is even more commendable. And because we have had so many brands call us up and say, can you please ask Start India to put a mural up on a wall with our logo on it? And I've had to push back saying, they're not those kind of guys. I think you're going to have to find someone else to do this shit for you. No, it's awesome that you guys have been able to, stay true to why you guys started out. Thank you so much for doing this. I hope it was fun and easy.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for spending your Saturday
Bye.
evening with me. Bye-bye.